Okay, so today I'm going to do something called sentence structures. This is probably the fundamental uh, base. This is the base of anything, right? So once you learn this, I think it'll actually give you a lot of confidence into knowing if a sentence is correct or not. Plus, it'll give you a lot of ways to vary sentences, which is I think harder for kids who are um, not confident when they write, right? They don't know if a sentence is correct or they have the same structure over and over again. So this is a good way to approach varied sentence structures, okay? So first, I'm going to give you a bunch of acronyms. So acronyms are basically abbreviations. Basically, they took first letter or some parts of a word and then combined it together. So for example, you guys know, everybody knows FBI, right? FBI stands for Federal Bureau of Investigations, right? You see it in all your TV shows. So the acronyms I'm going to give you now are for sentences. So first you have IC, and then you have IC DC, period, and then you have DC comma IC, and then you have IC semicolon IC, and IMWIC. Okay. Oh, actually, there's one more. It's IC, comma CC, IC. I know these kind of they look silly, right? But it's, I think, a good mnemonic. Mnemonic is something that helps you remember something, right? Good mnemonic for you guys to remember, right? So let's look at this. So what is IC? IC is basically independent clause, right? Independent clause. An independent clause is simply a sentence, right? It's a sentence. But you have to know what the difference between clause and a phrase is first before you could actually get into it. So the difference between a clause and a phrase, which can easily be confused, is clause has a subject, and it has a subject and a verb, right? Clause has a subject and a verb. Phrase usually has parts of it. It could have a verb, or it could have nouns, but they're not functioning as subjects, right? Or it could have subjects and verbs, but it's actually part of a prepositional phrase, right? So I'll give you an example. So this is a clause. So a clause, let's see. I like dogs, right? And if you watch some other lectures I've made, you probably know that the subject is I, like is the verb, and dogs is the object, right? Something that you like, right? So this is a clause because it has a subject and a verb, right? And even an object. All right, so a phrase is like something like looking at the dog, right? I know many of you are like, wait, looking, that sounds like a verb, right? But it's actually a participle phrase, right? I know the dog's there, right? But this looking at the dog doesn't have a subject, right? That's why this is just simply a phrase, right? So that's the difference between a clause and a phrase, right? So let's get back to the sentences. So the sentence structure that I had before, which I showed you, is IC, and IC, I told you earlier, is an independent clause. So independent clause has subject and verb, and it could stand alone as a sentence. So I like dogs, right? But what if you have something like, because I like dogs, right? Here's the problem, right? I know it has a subject. It even has a verb and an object, but this is not a sentence, right? Because I like dogs, right? This is not a sentence because it doesn't have a predicate, and a predicate is some kind of action, right? Some kind of action that took place. So this is what's known as a dependent clause, right? DC. You guys probably already assumed, right? It's a dependent clause. So if it's a dependent clause, meaning it needs something else, you probably need to write another sentence. Remember the sentence structures that you had? It was, IC, DC, and DC, IC. So, because I like dogs, I work at the pet shop, right? Oh, I guess pet shop is 2 words, right? So this is the sentence structure over here is DC, IC, right? And there are a bunch of words that make a independent clause, a dependent clause, right? There are certain words that do that, and those words include, and I recommend that you guys review this or write it down. Those words include after. So these are dependent marker words, right? I actually think Purdue OWL, which has a really good grammar reference page, uses it as a DMW, right? You don't have to know, you don't have to remember it this way, but these are just simply words that make an independent clause a dependent clause. So there are words like after, although, as if, because, before, even if, even though, since, unless, while, when. There are more, right? I'm sure there are many that I'm missing right now, but the whole point of this is to show you that this is these are words that turn an independent clause, which is a sentence, into a dependent clause, right? And here's a funny thing that you should notice. Remember the sentence structures that I already gave you guys, right? I gave you guys ICDC, right? Well, actually, I should do DCIC first since this is it. DCIC, which is the sentence structure right above, but ICDC is another one. Okay, so all you have to do is really put this part, right? Put this part in the front, right? I work at the pet shop, and then it has to be lowercase. I like dogs, right? And make sure you change this to a period. This is the exact same thing, except this part is the independent clause. I work at the pet shop is an independent clause, right? Because I like dogs is the dependent clause over here. Okay, it's the same thing. And some people are going to ask, wait, do I need to put a comma here? Yes or no? But you know, you're going to realize this later on that this is completely up to the author. If you want to make it important, you don't put the comma. If you want to make it important, then or unimportant, then you do put the comma. You separate it with the comma. Okay, so this is simply independent and dependent clauses. Alright, so we got the first three sentence structures out of the way. So you guys already know IC is just sentence, and these are the variations of dependent and independent clauses. So the next one that's up is IC, and what this is simply using semicolon, right? Many people are confused as to how to use this, but semicolon for the SATs, they don't use it in the most advanced way, which also includes commas. But semicolons are used basically to combine two independent clauses that are related in meaning. So you could say like, I like dogs, right? And then you could do they smell good. Right? So instead of writing many short sentences, this gives you another tool to write varied sentence structures, which I think is quite important. It's an important tool for kids, you know, who don't know where to start, right? So this is it. That's it. So you could, you know, swap the order around if you like, but remember to use it for related sentences. Okay? And also, this must always be lowercase because this is still one sentence. A pretty big mistake that I see kids make all the time. So that one's out of the way. Next one is going to be a little bit more tricky. But CC over here on the bottom, this is the one that we're doing. CC is in grammar jargon, and jargon means technical tool, technical terms, right? CC is coordinate conjunctions. Okay? Coordinate conjunctions. Now, what are they? See, a lot of kids memorize it this way, fanboys. And if I say fanboys, and I know some of you are already going to know, you know, what this means, right? So, fanboys stand for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Right? So, they just took the first letter of this mnemonic, right, and turned it into an acronym, right? What are these used for? For is a reason, so you could say I like dogs for they smell good, which is weird. And there's something you could do. I'll give you examples, right? So you could do like I like dogs for they smell good. So the first part over here, I like dogs, that's a sentence. and this is also a sentence, and they combined it with this coordinate conjunction for. You could do whichever one over here. Just make sure it makes sense in terms of the sentence logically. So you could say, I like dogs and they smell good. I like dogs nor they smell good. Well, that's not going to work, right? You could use nor in the beginning of a sentence. I like dogs but they smell good. Well, that logically doesn't work. Or it's the same thing. Just make sure this is not the same thing as saying like, I like dogs or cats. Right? It's not the same thing. This is not over here. This is not an independent clause, right? It's just another object over here. I like dogs or cats, right? So make sure you don't confuse that. Yet, you could use yet over here too, but it doesn't make sense over here grammatically. But you could use all of these, right? Any of these coordinate conjunctions to combine sentences. So this is another tool. One thing I would like to mention though is this sentence structure, which is not common. It's CCIC. So CCIC basically means out of all those acronyms I just gave you, can you start a sentence, right? So I know a lot of teachers are going to tell you don't start a sentence with but, right? Don't never start a sentence with but. That's not correct though. Right? You could start a sentence with but. You could say, but I don't know. Right? But I don't. That's a perfectly good sentence. I know a lot of teachers don't want and in front of you here either, or like for, but all of them work. Right? If they're telling you it's wrong, they're wrong. Okay?